at the time, my girls were very young. My youngest daughter's name is Brooklyn,
Mm,
and so it was like, what about Brooklyn bedding?
yeah.
And we did some searches, and it was available, and so that was
Wow.
when we launched Brooklyn bedding.
Hello and welcome to Starting Small. My name is Cameron Nagle, and what you're about to hear is a resilient story to an entrepreneur's journey over the brand that we know and consume today. At Starting Small, I believe that everyone has a story to tell under one philosophy. Everyone starts small. Even these founders have once started where you are, in their parents' kitchen, basement, out of a wagon, and many more. At Starting Small, we discuss the strategies used, the obstacles overcome, and the successes of an entrepreneur's journey. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of Starting Small, and make sure to leave a review to let us know how you enjoyed it. Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small. Today, I'm joined by John Merwin of Brooklyn Bedding. John, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yep, thank you for having me.
Of course. So I'd like to go back to your upbringing. What would you say your childhood was like, and how do you kind of describe your upbringing?
Yeah, I would say it's no different than most other kids. I grew up in a very small town in eastern Montana, town of 1,800 people. My graduating class had 42 people in the class, so very small, one flashing red blinking light. So just a small eastern town in Montana.
Amazing. Would you say that you had an entrepreneurial mindset, say what lemonade stands or selling products, anything like that?
Yeah, I don't know if I would say early on I had that. I was really big into sports,
Mm,
so my summers entailed going to wrestling camps and just I was active all the time. So
yeah.
I eventually went to college, and I wrestled in college for a couple years. And then after that, I would say I had a little bit, that's when the entrepreneurial spirit kind of kicked in is
Mhm.
after my athletic career ended in college.
Mm. So I know you went on to Montana State University. You mentioned you had an athletic career. Did you end up going into athletics with your time there? And also, what did you study with your time?
Yeah. So initially out of high school, I signed with a small NAIA school in Western Montana,
Mhm.
uh, Dillon, and I wrestled there for a year. Their program got cut, so then I transferred to a college in South Dakota, wrestled there for a year, and then wrestling is a tough sport. And back when I was doing it, we cut a lot of weight, and so it became the victories were making weight. And
Mm,
so I'm walking around now at 180 pounds. In college I wrestled 134, so I was a tiny little guy. But so
yeah.
it was after my second year of wrestling that I eventually gave that up, and then that's when I transferred to Montana State. And I was going into I wanted to be a teacher and a coach, was
Mm,
kind of the where I went with my education.
yeah. So following graduation, I'm curious, did you end up teaching for some time, or what did that period look like between Brooklyn
Yeah,
Betting and college?
so I didn't graduate.
Okay.
I would say after I stopped wrestling and became a normal college student. I struggled without the structure of athletics, and keeping me on the straight and narrow. I would say you know uh, the 2 years that I spent at Montana State, I probably was not in the classroom as much as one should be. So
Mm, yeah.
you know I yeah, I struggled. And it was then that I was dating my high school sweetheart. We got engaged. And it was right after I got engaged that I got a call from my brother, and he said, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm going to try to finish school and be a teacher and a coach. And that's when he said, well, he was in Arizona, and he said, well, after you get married, why don't you move down to Arizona? And I got this mattress thing going on, and I'd like you to run a store, and I'll run a store. He said, we can, we'll get really big, and
Yeah.
we'll get like 4 stores in the Phoenix area. And so I hung up the phone and was talking to my wife, and we both, like I said before, we grew up in a very small town, and
Mm,
it sounded exciting, and said, let's go for it.
wow. So I'm curious, when you joined, what did his existing, like, what did that look like? The existing mattress space that you entered, was there anything established by then, or was it kind of blind entrance for you?
Yeah, he had already, and I'll kind of go back. He had one retail store, and when I moved down, we opened up our second retail store.
Mhm.
And how he started, which I think is important to know, is he started selling scratch and dent, comfort exchanges, returns. He started selling those mattresses out of his garage, and he would put ads in the Penny Saver and take phone calls, and people would come and buy them, and then he would go back. He was buying them from an auctioneer, and then he would go back to that auctioneer a couple of weeks later and replenish inventory, and was doing it like that. And this was right around, cell phones had just hit the market, and so he had a bag phone, and then he thought, well, let me buy he had to buy a truck to transport all these mattresses, so he bought an old Wonder Bread truck.
Wow.
And so then he would drive around with his bag phone and a Wonder Bread truck full of mattresses, and he would take calls in the Penny Saver, and he would place calls in a certain section of, he would place ads in a certain section of town, and he would answer the phone, and the people be calling about the mattress, and he'd say, well, I just finished delivering a bed. I'm 10, 15 minutes away. I'll swing over and show you what I have.
Wow.
And so then he would drive over to their house and start schluffing beds off, and then he would sell mattresses. So then he would go back to the auctioneer and replenish his inventory. And that was when the auctioneer said, how are you selling these beds? Like he kind of took him under his wing, and he told him, and the guy said, he's like, that's crazy. He's like, you need retail stores. You need a store. How many houses can you hit in a day?
Yeah.
And so it was at that point that he took his advice, and he went and opened up a store and kind of got that running. And then that was, I don't know the exact time frame, but 6 months, 9 months later is when I got engaged. And then he called me up and, said,
Wow.
hey, why don't you come down? And so I moved down and opened up the store, and we were, it turned out that we were getting our inventory from Montgomery Wards. I don't know if you even remember Montgomery Wards.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
they were like a Sears or a JC Penney's back in the day, and so the auctioneer had a deal with Montgomery Ward. So he was buying, truckloads of mattresses, and they would be, like I said, comfort returns, exchanges, warranty problems, different things like that.
Yeah.
And so we eventually went direct to Montgomery Wards, and we started buying direct from them. And so when you're buying, and we were liquidators, right? So we start, we had 2 stores, and then we added another store, and pretty soon I think we're up to 4 or 5 stores at the time.
Wow.
And when you're buying liquidated product, you don't tell, we couldn't tell Montgomery Wards what we wanted.
Yes.
So, we wouldn't get a certain segment of product that we needed. Like we wouldn't get twin size beds. We wouldn't get full size beds. We wouldn't get foundations. There was just certain stuff that we wouldn't get.
Yeah.
And so we went to a real small local manufacturer here in town, and we started supplementing what we couldn't get on the liquidated side. And that's important in a little bit in the story. So
yeah,
we're up to 5 stores, and Montgomery Wards announces that they're going that they're BKing. And so I can't remember the year again. I should have looked all this stuff up, but we're scrambling because we're trying to figure out how we're going to stay in business. We had healthy margins, and we were trying to figure out where we're going to get product. And so that was when we went straight to Serta and Sealy and Simmons. They have factories here locally in Phoenix, and you start talking to them and saying, hey, we'd like to we'll buy whatever you want to sell us.
Yeah.
Crazy quilts, comfort returns, warranties, anything scratch and dent, anything that you want to sell, we'll buy. And so they start selling us product. And, it wasn't long that we're in their factory and we're looking at finished goods and trying to buy it. And over in the corner is some raw materials, and it's, some springs and some fabric and some foam, just stuff that, you get to know the plant manager a little bit. And it's like, hey, what is all that stuff over there?
Yeah.
He's like, well, it's obsolete raw material. It's, so-and-so changed their mind. And, we got stuck with this, we got stuck with 5 springs. We got stuck with some foam. It's like, well, what are you going to do with it? And it was then that the guy said, well, if we can't find anyone to buy it, we'll probably just scrap it. And so then it was like, well, how much do you want for it? And, we kind of start negotiating back and forth and come to an agreement. And so, okay, hey, I'll buy it. And so we load it up into our truck and we take it over to this small manufacturer that was building us product.
Yeah.
Grab him and say, hey, come here and check this out. And so he comes back, open up the truck, and here's all these components to make mattresses. And he's like, well, what do you want me to do with them? I'm like, well, we want you to make beds out of it. And he's like, well, how do you want it to look? And how am I going to charge you? And, he had all these questions and we didn't care because like, I don't care what it looks like. Just build it, give us a good deal and we'll sell it. We're the name of our company was R&S Mattress Liquidators. We were liquidators. We don't care what it looks like.
Yeah.
And he couldn't wrap his head around that. And so, he's like, no, he's like, I want you to continue buying what I'm building. And I don't want to bring all these miscellaneous raw materials in that I'm not familiar with. And he's like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, well, we take that stuff back to our warehouse and kind of throw it in the corner. And it's like, just kind of forget about it. Yeah. Well, a month later, 2 months later, we're back in Sealy's office and we're looking at more finished goods. Well, now this time the guy says, hey, you see those finished goods over there? And we're like, yeah, that's what you want to buy, right? It's like, yes. Well, before I sell you those, you need to buy all these raw materials. And he points over to a pile and he had more miscellaneous raw materials piled up. And so it's like, well, there might be an opportunity here, but we need to figure out how to make a mattress. Yeah. And we just asked the guy, like, hey, can you show us how some of this equipment runs? How do I make a mattress? Yeah. And so pretty soon we're on a tour of the factory and looking at equipment and kind of looking at how they're building the beds. And it wasn't more than, a month later, we bought our first sewing machine and wow, we just started building mattresses. That's incredible. And yep. And we lived in that liquidation world for, probably 10 plus years. Mm-hmm. And, we just kept adding retail stores. And so, we probably got up to, at one point, we got up to 25 retail stores. And wow, these are the type of retail stores that, everything we sold was one of a kind. Yeah. So, because, so we would look for large locations, but with very cheap rent. And so, some people joke around. It was like, if you wanted to find an R&S, you needed to look between a lube shop and a vape shop. Right. I mean, it was just, but big locations. So yeah. Pretty soon in the space, we become known as, hey, there's these guys in Phoenix that they'll buy anything. So not only were we dealing with all the manufacturers here locally, but pretty soon we start getting calls from factories all over the country. Wow. And not only were we getting calls from the factories, but we were also getting calls from the guys that supply those factories. Yeah. So, there's always, or at least back then, there was always, some closeouts or, some fabric that someone changed their mind, or, a spring got built and it was a 1/2 inch off and it didn't meet spec. And so we were the guys that would come in and we would pay cash and we would buy all that stuff. Yeah. And so that's how we cut our teeth in learning how to make mattresses. There wasn't, every time I would get a call from a factory, especially if it was one that I wasn't familiar with or anything like that, I would I'd like, well, yeah, we're very interested. Please send me over a list of all the raw materials you have. And they would, and then I would, call them and say, hey, you know what? I would like to fly out there. I'd like to put my hands on it, touch it, see it, and different things like that. And so, I can say this now, ultimately what I really wanted to do was I just wanted to get in their factory. Right. So, every, and we're very proud of our facility, and everyone's proud of the manufacturing facility that they have. So it would, I would be in the factory and I'd be looking at some fabric, and pretty soon it'd be like, I'd look over and I'd be like, man, what is that? I've never seen a machine like that. And the guy was like, oh, well, that's what puts our handles on. Well, here, come check it out. And pretty soon I'm on a tour of this factory. And so I feel very fortunate that I was able to do that. So the whole time, I'm going into all these big factories and I'm seeing different ways. Every company builds beds a little bit different, and they have different processes and different flow. And so, I was very fortunate in the fact that I got to, get into these facilities and see firsthand how they built beds.
Yeah. It's very interesting. I'm curious, like, how did you map out the business concept with you're taking in raw materials? You mentioned one of a kind. And how do you convince consumers that this bed is maybe right for them, or you don't have a specific bed line at this point, so this bed's different from your next bed you're about to build? And how do you sell to consumers? Do they test them out? How does that go?
Yeah, so we were still buying liquidated name brands.
Yeah.
So we were buying beds from Serta and Sealy and Simmons. So customers would come into our retail stores and they'd be looking for a queen size mattress, and we would start showing them, whatever liquidated product we had. So, there's a Serta Perfect Sleeper, and at retail, this bed was $1,000, and we were selling it for $499. And it might have a rip on it, or it might have been a 30-day comfort exchange, something like that. So, and then if that was a product that they didn't like, or if we didn't have, very good inventory on our liquidated product, that was when we would roll into the R&S mattress brand.
Yeah.
And that would be a bed, and I'm not joking when I say this, I could build a bed, and I could have, a spring that I bought from Sealy, some foam that I bought from one of the different foam companies, some fabric that I bought from Simmons, and I was buying components from all these different companies and then bringing it into our manufacturing facility and putting it together.
Yeah.
So there was some validation in the sense that we had those name brands in our facility, in our store. And if the customer didn't like that, then we would move them into the R&S mattress brand.
Got it. I'm curious then, as years continued, I'm curious, when does this transition come where you're taking in raw materials and you decide that you guys want to fully manufacture in-house? When do you start getting rid of liquidation, and how does that journey kind of evolve for Brooklyn Bedding?
Yep. So I would say it started in I don't remember the year, but I would say it started when I saw the first mattress being put in a box.
Yeah.
And my wife was an early e-commerce shopper, and she's the one that kind of pointed it out to me. She was on overstock.com, I believe. And, one night laying in bed, she's like, hey, honey, look, there's a mattress right here, and they'll ship it right to you. And I look at it, and it was rather inexpensive. It was a 10-inch memory foam mattress. And I'm like, well, buy it, and have it brought in. She buys it, and a week later, this thing shows up on my doorstep in a small, relatively small box. And, I couldn't believe it. And so I take it up to the factory, and we cut it open and, open the whole thing up and dissect it. And that is when things started to change for us. So, I saw that, and I thought, this is what I want to do. I want to try to sell a bed online, and ultimately I would like to try to manufacture something like this. Yeah. And so through the years of being a liquidator and buying all these different raw materials from all these different vendors and suppliers and stuff. I developed a, you know, a Rolodex of people that I could call and ask questions. And so I start calling and I'm like, hey, who's bringing in these memory foam mattresses out of China? And after a couple of days, I finally get a hold of a guy and I call him up and I tell him, hey, I'm interested. I would like to bring in some beds that are rolled up and I want to try to sell beds on the internet. Mm-hmm. He's like, okay. He's like, well, do you want to go to China? And I'm like, I'd love to. And so we, 3 weeks later, we're on a plane to China and he takes me through, 6 to 7 factories and I get to see how they're making these beds. And he takes me to some fabric suppliers and it was as simple as, they were making a memory foam mattress and they're compressing it. And then there were 4 guys just rolling it up by hand and taping it.
Wow.
And so, And so I was like, this is what I wanted to do. So I designed a 3-bed lineup while we were in China, and I ended up buying 2 to 3 containers of mattresses. And, they're on their way over and I come back and I'm like, I'm going to sell some beds on the internet. Yeah. And so we launch a website and, I put all these beds up there and I'm trying to sell them and we don't sell a single one. I couldn't sell anything. I didn't know any, I would say, I'm not the marketing guy in the company. Right.
Yeah.
So, I didn't know how to market the website. I just struggled and couldn't sell anything. But the one thing that I could never get hurt because I had my own local retail stores. So we eventually just sold that product out through our retail stores. And the whole time, I'm looking at these beds that I've imported and I'm looking at all this money that I've invested in equipment in my own manufacturing facility. And, the whole time I'm like, I want to be able to put a mattress in a box. I want to, I went and saw how they're doing it. Yeah. There's no reason why I can't do it here. And so I eventually, through some equipment contacts, found a supplier out of Italy that makes a roll pack machine. In Europe, they've been putting beds in, putting mattresses in a box for a long time. Yeah. And so there was equipment there. And so I fly out there, I look at that equipment and just kind of take a leap of that, and I think at that time that machine was 125,000 or, something like that, which is, that's a lot of money. And so I buy that machine, I bring it in and I'm like, okay, we're going to figure this out. And so I launched a bed on Amazon and I put it under the Dream Foam bedding brand. Was, I developed I wanted a different brand. Arnis mattress wasn't really a brand. I'm like, I wanted a little bit different brand. And I just put it up there and kind of forgot about it. And I'm, we're opening retail stores and running the retail side of the business. And then all of a sudden I get an email one day and sold a bed on Amazon. And it's like, wow, this is great. And so I, go back there, we build it and we run it through the roll pack machine and get it boxed up. And I mean, we didn't have a FedEx truck or anything. So I literally drove it down to the FedEx store myself and made sure that it got, shipped out. Yeah. The whole time I'm driving back to the factory. I'm like, this is great. This is awesome. So then, 2 days go by, 3 days go by and we sell another bed and then we sell another bed and then we get a review. And, once that momentum started happening, Amazon is where we really first cut our teeth online. And so, I'll tell the story real quick. We had one bed on Amazon and I think we had up to 30 reviews on it and we were doing a really good job. And I get a call from someone in Amazon's marketing department. And they said, hey, this is so-and-so Amazon marketing. And, we've kind of been following your Amazon store and you guys are doing a great job. You get great reviews and we'd like to do a little marketing piece on your company. And I said, okay, great. So they interview me and they said, can you send us a picture, with next to a rolled up mattress? And so I take a picture, send it to them. And they said, okay, we're going to launch this piece, this editorial. We're going to launch this on our mattress page. And, we're going to do it on a Tuesday and that Tuesday, you should see a nice little spike in business. And then after that, there'll be a link, but then the next Tuesday, we're going to highlight another small business. And so, I had no idea what to expect. Right. So
Yeah.
they launch it, and I get a call about 7:30 from my plant manager, and I answer it, and I'm like, "Hey, what's up?" And he's like, "What's going on?" I'm like, "Well, I don't know. What do you mean?" He's like, "Amazon." He's like, "We've already had more sales than we've ever had." And it was 7:30 in the morning. I'm like, "Well, I told you they were going to run that editorial, and they said to expect a spike in business." He's like, "Yeah, this is huge." And I can't remember what it was. I mean, it might've been 40 beds or something, at the time. And so I'm like, well, let me log on. And I log on to Amazon, I log on Amazon.com, and on the homepage of Amazon.com, above the fold is my picture. And it says Dream Foam Bedding. I even have it right here, because they eventually sent it to me, but it's hard to see, but
that's very cool.
This is it right here. It says Dream Foam gets your bed just right. And this is on the homepage of Amazon.com. And
wow.
And so I'm like, I can't believe this. This is crazy. And so obviously Tuesday was really, really good. Wednesday, I log on to Amazon.com, and it's down, but you could still see a link there.
Yeah.
And so, that Wednesday was good. Thursday, business tailed off a little bit, but it was like, wow, that was amazing. And so then next Tuesday at 7:30 in the morning, I get a call from my plant manager again. He's like, dude, it's happening again. I'm like, what? And he's like, Amazon, it's going nuts.
Wow.
And so I log on to Amazon.com, and sure enough, there's that picture and the article again.
Wow.
And I'm on the phone with him. I'm like, dude, I can't believe it. It's up there again. And he's like, I thought it was only going to go 1 week. I'm like, that's what they told me. And he's like, well, maybe they made a mistake. Are you going to call them and ask them? I'm like, no, I'm not going to call them and ask them. I mean, if they, I don't want to tell them to take it down. Maybe they did make a mistake.
Yeah.
So fast forward, the next week it's back up on a Tuesday. It would always come down, after Tuesday, but there'd be a link, and then the next week it's up on Tuesday. So pretty soon, I was the one that was taking all the phone calls and answering all the questions, and then trying to process all the orders, and it's getting so busy that I can't handle that anymore. And so I bring in a guy from one of our stores. I'm like, hey, you're going to answer all these questions and make sure these beds are getting shipped out, and I'm going to make sure that they're getting built. Yeah. And so to fast forward a little bit, Amazon ran that piece for the next 7 months and, didn't call, didn't say anything. And finally, at the 7th month, I get a call from someone at Amazon, and they, said, hey, this is so-and-so with the Amazon marketing department. I just want to let you know that this next Tuesday is going to be the last day that your piece runs. And I'm like, oh man, I was hoping I'd never get a call from you guys.
Yeah.
So that's what really catapulted our e-commerce business.
Wow. That's incredible. I'm curious, especially since this success with Amazon and the marketing there, how much of your business would you say that shifted online? And especially today, do you see much of your business online in contrast to retail, bed in the box, et cetera?
Yeah. I mean, right now, 85% of our revenue is done online.
Yeah.
At the time, back when Amazon was happening, I looked at Amazon as, hey, this could eventually be, equivalent to one of our retail stores. Yeah. And then, through that 7 months, it quickly surpassed the retail stores. And it was like, hey, this could be as big as all of our retail stores. Yeah. And then, so I'll go back just a little bit on, I hired that gentleman to answer calls and different things like that. And we only had one mattress on Amazon. And this is probably after the 3rd week or the 4th week. And and he's taking a call and I'm listening to him, and he's trying to sell a bed, and he hangs up and he doesn't sell a bed. And so I walk into his office. I'm like, hey, what happened with that? I'm like, that
Yeah.
sounded really good. Sounded like you were going to sell her something. And he's like, yeah, she didn't want, she didn't want a 12-inch mattress. She wanted a 10-inch memory foam mattress.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, I'm like, we have a 10-inch memory foam mattress. I'm like, we got tons of them in the back. And he's like, well, we don't have one on Amazon. I say, you call that lady back right now and you tell her by the end of the day, we'll have a 10-inch memory foam mattress listed on Amazon. And so he calls her back and he's like, hey, I just talked to my boss, and we actually have a 10-inch memory foam mattress. We just don't have it on Amazon. And so I go in the back and I take some pictures and I launch that bed on Amazon, and pretty soon we start selling this mattress. And so that, we didn't know when this piece was going to come down. And so then I just spent that 6 months, 7 months, just, really kind of studying where I felt like there were, holes and where I could sell, slot some product in and sell some product. So, when we first started, we had one mattress on Amazon. By the end of that 7 months, out of the top 100 mattresses being sold on Amazon, we had 25 of them. And we had 12 of the top 20, because they have rankings, and I, learned how to follow the rankings, and I would keep track of all of this stuff. And so, and that is also about the same time that, Tuft and Needle came into business, and Casper came into business. And these guys came in with a completely different model, right? Back when they started, it was one mattress. Yeah. And, so I kind of looked at that and I was like, man, that's ridiculous. I'm selling 25 different models on Amazon and, having success. And, these guys are trying to say that they're only going to sell one. I'm like, that's never going to work. And obviously that was very wrong, but, that was the start of our e-com business and our transition away from being a liquidator. So I would, for sure, launching that Dream Foam brand, really taught me the importance and the value of a brand. And so it was during that process that, and then Casper launched and Tuft and Needle launched. It was during that it was like, hey, R&S mattress really isn't a brand. We need a R&S mattress might be our store, but it's not a brand. Yeah. And so that's when, we're like, hey, we need to brand our product. And, at the time, my girls were very young. My youngest daughter's name is Brooklyn. And so it was like, what about Brooklyn bedding? Yeah. And, we did some searches and it was available. And so that was when we launched Brooklyn bedding. So we had Dream Foam bedding on Amazon, and then we had Brooklyn bedding in our retail stores. Wow. Well, pretty soon in our retail stores, we get some nice labels made, and it's the Brooklyn bedding brand. And pretty soon, all the guys would sell in our retail stores was Brooklyn bedding. Yeah. And they kind of transitioned away from all the liquidated product, and the liquidation business is great, but it's fickle, right? Because it's only as good as the next deal you can find. And, you're constantly out trying to find, the next deal on fabric, the next deal on foam. And then you have to bring in massive amounts of inventory. If, that's how you got the best deals, the larger deals always seem to be the better deals. So there were times in the process where, I would make a deal on something, and then I would have to go temporarily lease, 30, 40,000 square feet just to hold all this stuff. Wow. And then we would bring it in. But, you also got to realize, we were buying raw materials at pennies on the dollar. So, it made sense for me to do that. For sure. Well, with such amazing evolution there, describing back in the liquidation days, moving into retail stores, moving into Amazon and e-commerce, I saw online that you guys are also now manufacturing for private label brands. If you can kind of describe that evolution from going onto your own e-commerce store, having so much success, and manufacturing now for other private label brands. Yep. So during the Amazon process, we got to a point where we were at max capacity, and we were still working out of our our first facility, but we had leased out a couple different buildings.
Mhm.
And so I'm like, hey, we need a bigger facility. And so I started looking for real estate, couldn't find anything. And I ended up building a factory. And the whole time I'm building this facility, I had the mindset of, every single mattress that I build out of this facility is going to go in a box. And
Yeah.
so, it was a relatively quick process, but, started construction on the facility, invested in a lot of conveyor, and really laid out the facility to where I felt like I could be very, very efficient and triple and quadruple my production of where I currently was.
Yeah.
And so we move into this new facility, and it was and Amazon's still going great, and Brooklyn Bedding's doing well, and our retail stores are doing well. And it was a Wednesday, I think it was a Wednesday afternoon, and it was a month or a month and a half into this facility. And I walk down onto the factory floor, and I look around, and all these guys are just standing around. I'm like, I grab my plant manager. I'm like, hey, what's going on?
Yeah.
He's like, we're done. He's like, we've built everything. Like, well, we've shipped all our orders, and we're caught up. And I'm like, well, build some inventory. Don't let these guys just stand around. Let's keep them working. And he's like, we did. And he pointed over, and there's a ton of inventory. And so before we had moved into that facility, we were working out of 4 different buildings. And so we would have, some raw materials here, and we would have foam over here. And so we were so inefficient that, we just had guys everywhere. And when we transitioned, I didn't want to let anyone go or anything like that. But, after we moved into this new facility, we became so much more efficient because of the processes and just the different things that we had put in place. And so it was like, I'm like, holy cow. I'm like, we need to sell more product. And so it was at that time that, like I said, I had some people in the industry that knew me, and this was during the mattress e-com, all these companies popping up and starting mattress websites. And a lot of these guys, they didn't manufacture anything. So they were looking for someone to build their product.
Yeah.
And so word got out that, hey, Brooklyn Bedding in Phoenix has some open capacity, and they can put beds in a box. And so then that's what started our wholesale manufacturing.
Amazing. So when you first started doing that, how many companies would you say would come to you? Would you pursue companies? And was there like a portfolio maximum that you guys would max out on? You wouldn't take on any more? How did that look?
No, it was more along the lines of, there's certainly, I would go out and try to solicit some business. And there were, there certainly were some companies that said, no, we won't use you because you compete against us. And so there was a handful of guys that just said, we'll never buy from you. And then there were others that said, look, the opportunity is so big, and you're already doing it. We would love for you to make our product.
Yeah.
And I give all the credit to the guys on the floor and the guys that build the product, but we were really good at it. We knew the importance of, getting a mattress out on time. And, we knew the importance of how hard it was to acquire that customer. And then, hey, we need to deliver an excellent product, and we need to deliver it quickly. So we were very, very good at that. So, the guys that did come to us and want us to build their product, we're very happy. We did a very good job for them. And we've continued to do that to this day.
For sure. I'm curious, to this day, what would you say is the largest part of your business? Would you say like Brooklyn Bedding, or do you guys focus more? Do you have so many private labels that you're manufacturing more for other brands? How does that kind of portion lay out now today for Brooklyn Bedding?
Yeah, currently our D2C business is the largest portion of our business.
For sure.
Right now. And then, then falls in under, our wholesale falls in underneath that.
Got it. Well, I like to conclude each episode with this, and with such an amazing history and evolution of this story, I know you have so much inspiration to share. If you can share one piece of advice with an aspiring entrepreneur, maybe something you've learned along the way, or maybe you regret, what would you say that would be?
Yeah. I would say, it took me a long time to, and I don't know if this is because I call myself cheap or, whatever, but it took me a long time to really invest in people.
Mm,
And, so while we were building the business and I would say the sooner that you can budget it and the sooner that you can afford to do it, to bring in talent
yeah.
and very talented people. Right now, you know, the quality of people that we have on our staff is phenomenal. I mean, these people are so smart, so talented, and they're able to work on on what they were brought in for.
Yeah.
And so I would say, that's what I would say. I would say when you can, try to hire and bring in as much talent as possible.
For sure. Well, John, thank you so much for joining me. And to the listeners out there, make sure to check out Brooklyn Bedding at brooklynbedding.com.